I want you to erase the image you have of a Hollywood action movie. Just for a second. Forget the boardroom full of executives, the craft services tables, all the safety inspectors. Instead, I want you to picture a chaotic emergency room. It's Melbourne, Australia, maybe 1977. And there's a doctor there working double shifts, stitching up the broken bodies of car crash victims. He is exhausted. He is surrounded by trauma, and every single dollar he earns from that grim reality isn't going into a savings account. It's buying gasoline for a movie set that has absolutely no business existing. The film we're diving into today wasn't funded by a bank. It was funded by blood, sweat, and the literal wreckage of the road.
Hello and welcome back. You're listening to a special deep dive for the Entre Líneas channel. I'm Christina, and I'm here to find those human stories hidden in the margins.
And I'm Carlos. Today, we aren't just talking about a movie. We are analyzing what is basically a miracle of logistics. We're stripping the paint off one of the most seminal action films ever made, Mad Max from 1979.
Now, most people know the leather, the cars, the young Mel Gibson. But the sources we've pulled for this deep dive paint a very different picture. This wasn't a professional production, was it? This was essentially a bunch of maniacs with cameras just dodging the police.
Yeah, that's a pretty accurate summary. To understand Mad Max, you have to get the context. It's 1979. Australia has been hit hard by the 1973 oil crisis. Society feels fragile, and the film takes that anxiety and just cranks it up to 11. A dystopian world where order is collapsing and the most valuable currency is gasoline.
Right. And the plot is simple enough. Max Rockatansky, a highway patrolman, he loses everything to a feral motorcycle gang and goes on a revenge spree.
Yeah.
But we aren't here for the plot. We are here for the production, which was, just as dangerous as the movie itself.
Exactly. So let's go back to that emergency room I mentioned. The director, George Miller, and his producing partner, Byron Kennedy, they had this amazing vision, but they had absolutely no money. Estimates vary a little, but the budget was somewhere around, $350,000 to 400,000 Australian dollars.
Which, for anyone listening, is practically zero in filmmaking terms. Even adjusted for inflation, that's barely $1 million today. You can't even make a catering budget for a Marvel movie with that.
Let alone a high-speed car chase film. So they didn't just find investors, they became the investors. George Miller was a qualified doctor. He spent 3 months working emergency calls just to raise the cash.
And Byron Kennedy, he wasn't just producing, he was driving the emergency car for medical calls to earn extra money.
Can you imagine that? Miller is seeing these horrific injuries from real car accidents by day, and then at night, he's planning a movie about horrific car accidents. It sort of explains why the violence in Mad Max feels so visceral, so real.
It doesn't look like Hollywood violence at all. It looks like medical trauma.
And that do-it-yourself desperation was everywhere. They didn't have money for a professional studio. They literally edited the film in a friend's apartment in North Melbourne. Miller was cutting the visuals in the kitchen,
while Kennedy was mixing the sound in the lounge room.
Right.
Yeah, on a machine they built themselves. They built it themselves.
They designed their own editing equipment because they couldn't afford to rent it. That is the definition of guerrilla filmmaking. But, you can build a machine, but you can't exactly build a leading man.
Yeah, you have to find one. And the story of how they found Mel Gibson is... it's probably the happiest accident in cinema history.
Yeah.
Because honestly, he wasn't even supposed to be there.
Right, he was a nobody at the time, wasn't he? A drama student.
Totally unknown. And he didn't even go to the audition to read for the part of Max. He was just driving his friend, his roommate, Steve Bisley, to the casting call.
And Bisley ended up playing Jim Goose, Max's partner in the film.
Exactly. Bisley was the one actually trying to get the job. But the night before, Mel Gibson had been in this huge bar brawl. And I don't mean a little scuffle. His face was, it was destroyed. It was black and blue, his nose was swollen, his jaw bruised. He looked like a smashed pumpkin.
Not exactly the matinee idol look they usually go for.
Not at all. But he's sitting in the reception area waiting for Steve, and the casting director sees this bruised, battered guy in the corner. She took a Polaroid of him and said, "Look, we need freaks for this movie. We need villains. Come back in 3 weeks when you heal up. We might have a role for you."
We need freaks. What a casting call.
But he did it. He came back 3 weeks later. But by then, the swelling was gone, his jawline was back, and suddenly he wasn't a freak. He was this incredibly striking, rugged young man. They hired him right on the spot to be Max.
Wow, and the return on that is just staggering. They paid him something like $10,000 for that role. That 10 grand launched a career that's generated billions. But speaking of freaks, they had a really serious problem finding the bad guys.
Right, the Toe Cutters gang. If you have no budget, you can't hire 40 actors, dress them all up, pay stunt coordinators to teach them how to ride bikes safely.
So what did they do? They did the only logical thing. They hired an actual outlaw motorcycle club.
The vigilantes. And this is where the line between fiction and reality just gets so blurry. These weren't actors pretending to be tough. I mean, they were genuine bikers. They rode their own motorcycles, mostly these big Kawasaki KZ-1000s, to the set every single day. They wore their own club gear. They brought their own attitude.
It must have saved them a fortune in costume and vehicle rental, but what a logistical nightmare. You have a real biker gang on a movie set.
It was terrifying for the locals. You have to picture suburban Melbourne in the late 70s. All of a sudden, you've got these guys in leather carrying axes and chains, riding in formation down public roads to get to the location. They weren't changing into costume on set. The commute was the costume.
That sounds like a fast track to getting your entire cast arrested.
Oh, it almost was.
Yeah.
And this led to a legal nightmare that George Miller had to solve with just a pen and some paper. He essentially wrote them get out of jail free letters.
You're kidding. Literally.
Literally. The production printed these official-looking letters on company letterhead, explaining to any police officer, this man is an actor in the film Mad Max. He is carrying prop weapons. Please do not arrest him.
I can just imagine the look on a local cop's face. He pulls over a guy with a machete, and the guy hands him a note from his director.
But here's the crazy part. The police actually got on board. At first, the filming was totally illegal. Miller didn't have permits to close the roads. They'd just race out, film a stunt, and then run away. But eventually, the local police became fascinated by the whole thing. They started volunteering to block off roads for them.
So you had the outlaws and the police basically working on the same film crew.
Exactly. But even with the police helping, you still have to pay the bikers. You can't pay a biker gang with, exposure.
And they didn't have much cash left. So, as the story goes, they resorted to the universal currency of Australia.
Beer.
Yes. Slabs, or cases of beer. A lot of the extras and the bikers were paid for a day's work with a case of beer. Today, the Screen Actors Guild would shut you down in a heartbeat for something like that.
Oh, absolutely. It's a lawsuit waiting to happen, but on screen, it translates to this raw, chaotic energy. They look like a gang because they are a gang. But while the bikers were real, not everything we see on screen was genuine. Being cheap had some visual downsides.
Ah, the famous leather issue. When you think of Mad Max, you think of black leather. It defines that whole post-apocalyptic look.
It really does. But if you have a 4K version and you pause during the fight scenes, take a close look at the pants, especially the knees.
The knees? Why the knees?
Because they're splitting open. The budget was so tight that only Mel Gibson and maybe one or two other main actors got real leather. Everyone else, Steve Bisley as Goose, the other MFB officers, the gang members, they were all wearing black vinyl.
Like from a cheap couch.
Exactly. And vinyl doesn't stretch. So every time they did a high kick or even just crouched down, the pants would just tear. They were constantly patching them up with black tape between takes.
So we have the toughest gang in cinema history wearing pants that are literally falling apart at the seams. That's perfect. But speaking of cheap materials faking it as something tough, we have to talk about the car. The V8 Interceptor.
The Pursuit Special. It's a character in its own right.
It is. That black Ford Falcon XB GT is maybe the most recognizable car in Australian history. And the coolest part is that massive supercharger sticking out of the hood. You know the scene Max is driving, he needs more speed, so he flips a red switch, the blower starts whining, and the car just rockets forward.
It's pure raw muscle.
Pure raw lies.
Oh no, don't tell me it was cardboard.
Not cardboard, but mechanically impossible. For anyone who isn't a gearhead, a real supercharger forces air into the engine. It's driven by a belt connected to the engine itself. It runs all the time. You cannot just turn a supercharger on and off with a switch.
Okay, so what were we actually seeing on screen then?
We were seeing a prop. The supercharger wasn't connected to the engine at all. To make the belt spin, when Max activated it, they rigged a little electric motor under the hood.
Like a toy motor.
Basically, some say it was from a washing machine, others say a water pump. But the reality is, when Mel Gibson flips that switch, he's basically just turning on a kitchen appliance to spin a fan belt.
That is movie magic at its most brilliant. The most aggressive car in the world, secretly powered by a washing machine part.
But it worked. It sold the fantasy. And that ingenuity, it applied to the crashes too. There's that great opening sequence where the Knight Rider smashes a stolen police car into a blue van.
The Mazda Bongo van. It gets absolutely obliterated, just spins down the highway like a top.
And the reason it spins like that is because it was empty. To make the crash look more violent, they stripped the engine and transmission right out of the van. It was just a hollow metal shell, so when the car hit it, it just went flying. But my favorite detail is the debris. When it hits, there's this huge white explosion of liquid.
Right, which looks like paint or some kind of toxic chemical.
You'd think so, but paint is expensive, and more importantly, it's really hard to clean up. And they didn't have a cleanup crew. Miller and Kennedy had to sweep the roads themselves after shooting.
What was it?
Milk.
Milk.
Like from a cow.
Just dairy. They filled some cans with milk and strapped them to the van. When it smashed, the milk exploded, creating that dramatic white spray. And the best part, it's biodegradable. It washes away with the next rain. No sweeping required.
That is absolute genius. We need a massive chemical spill. Get a cow. But not every trick worked that smoothly. We have to talk about the rocket car.
Oh, the Knight Rider's death scene. This was a complete disaster that miraculously didn't kill anyone.
The script called for his car to crash into a fuel tanker at high speed. But the car they were using, a Holden Monaro, just wasn't fast enough to create the kind of impact they wanted. A normal car hitting a truck just crunches.
So in the grand spirit of 1970s Australia, they decided to strap a military-grade rocket booster to the back of the car.
As one does, naturally. The plan was simple. Light the rocket, car hits tanker, big boom. But they didn't account for aerodynamics. The second that rocket ignited, the car just became a projectile. It didn't drive, it flew, it swerved instantly, missed the tanker completely, and launched itself about a quarter of a mile into a random field.
Can you just imagine being the cinematographer watching your main prop car just fly off into the horizon?
It was a total failure. They didn't get the shot. They had to fake the explosion later by cutting to a different stationary car and just blowing that one up. But it just shows the level of risk they were willing to take.
And speaking of risk, the danger wasn't just for the stunt drivers. It extended to the crew. There is one specific shot in that film that gives me anxiety just thinking about it.
The point of view shot from the motorcycle.
Yes. The camera is right behind the handlebars of a bike, just screaming down the center line. You can see the speedometer hitting 110 miles per hour. That's nearly 180 kilometers per hour. And it feels so incredibly real.
Because there were no GoPros, no drones, no fancy stabilizing gimbals back then.
No. That was the cinematographer, a guy named David Egby. He strapped himself onto the back of a motorbike driven by a stuntman, holding a heavy 35mm film camera on his shoulder. And, he wasn't wearing a helmet.
At 180 kilometers per hour, no helmet.
No helmet. Just a guy in a t-shirt, hanging on for dear life, squinting into a lens. If that bike had hit a single pebble, he would have been dead. Instantly.
It's terrifying, but that recklessness is exactly why the film holds up so well. You feel the danger because the danger is actually real. You can't fake that. But here's the bizarre twist. After all this risk, all this effort to make this Australian masterpiece, when it finally gets to America, it was sort of rejected. Not because of the violence, but because of the language.
The linguistic barrier, which is just absurd because, they speak English in Australia.
Right. But the American distributors in 1980 decided that the Australian accents were too thick. And they thought audiences in middle America wouldn't understand the slang. They thought it sounded too foreign.
So they did the unthinkable.
They redubbed the entire movie. They hired American voice actors to record over everyone's original performances, even Mel Gibson's.
And Mel Gibson was born in New York. He moved to Australia when he was 12, but he has American roots.
Didn't matter. They erased his voice. So for 20 years, most Americans watching Mad Max on TV or VHS were listening to this generic, terrible American dub. It just completely ruined the gritty atmosphere.
It wasn't until the DVD release around 2000 that the original Australian audio became the standard again. But at least Americans got to see it. New Zealand just banned it.
They did. And this connects right back to the reality of the violence. There's that scene where Goose is burned alive in his vehicle. It's a brutal scene. Well, in New Zealand, right before the release, there had been a real-life gang incident that was almost identical to that scene. The censors felt it was just too close to home, too raw. They banned the film for years.
Wow. It really reinforces that idea that Miller wasn't just making a fantasy, he was making a documentary of a future that felt like it was right around the corner.
And that brings us to what might be the most potent curiosity of all. The one that connects the very beginning of this low-budget experiment to the massive blockbusters of today. It's about the villain.
The toe cutter, played by Hugh Keays-Byrne.
He's terrifying in that 1979 film. He has this Shakespearean psychotic energy. He isn't just a thug, he's like a philosopher of violence.
Usually in a franchise, the villain dies and you move on. You cast a new bad guy for the sequel.
But George Miller is a loyal director, so you fast forward 30 years, Miller returns to the wasteland to make Mad Max, Fury Road in 2015. He has a budget of $150 million this time. He can hire anyone in Hollywood.
But he doesn't want anyone.
He calls Hugh Keysborn. The same man who played the toe cutter in 1979 returns to play Immortan Joe in 2015.
It gives me chills just thinking of it. It's so poetic. The actor who terrorized Max in the tiny indie film returns as the ultimate warlord in the finale.
It bridges the gap perfectly.
Yeah.
When you look at Immortan Joe's eyes behind that mask, you're looking at the same eyes that started all this chaos decades earlier. It closes the loop.
It really does. So what's the takeaway here? We started with an exhausted doctor in an ER. We ended with a billion-dollar franchise.
I think the takeaway is that limitations, they breed creativity.
Absolutely. George Miller used the trauma he witnessed to create what he called a silent movie with sound.
Yeah.
Pure kinetic energy. And that $350,000 investment, it made over $100 million at the box office.
For 20 years, until the Blair Witch Project came along, Mad Max held the Guinness World Record for the most profitable film of all time.
The madness of the production, the fake engines, the dangerous stunts, the payment in beer, it wasn't a hindrance, it was the secret sauce. That desperation made the movie feel dangerous because it was the danger.
You don't need a massive budget to make history. You just need a vision, some milk cans, and maybe a washing machine motor.
And perhaps a total lack of concern for personal safety.
That helps too. Now, I have to ask you, the listener, which of these guerrilla filmmaking tricks surprised you the most? Was it the vinyl pants splitting open, or the cameraman hanging off a bike at 110 miles per hour?
For me, it has to be the get out of jail letters. The idea of police cooperating with a gang they're actively terrified of is just, it's too good.
Well, if you want to see the visual proof of these stories, and that includes a breakdown of that fake supercharger mechanism, head over to the Entre Lineas members area. We have a deep dive video there showing exactly how they rigged all the stunts.
It is definitely worth a look. Thanks for joining us on this ride through the wasteland.
Until next time, keep reading between the lines.